Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video where today we've got another brand new updated motorcycle to look at, the 2022 Yamaha XSR900. There are so many bikes coming thick and fast at this time of year, so if you're new here, please do hit subscribe to keep up to date with the latest and greatest. But in this video we'll go over the 15 best features of this awesome looking retro which has had a massive update for the next model year. But before we get started, a quick shout out to my channel sponsors Speedo Angels. They make these dash protectors for a whole range of bikes, including the dash on this new XSR900, and so you could potentially save yourself a fortune by just spending a few quid to prevent it from getting scratched or damaged. There's a link in the description below, plus a 20% discount code. Now, loads of the bikes that I'm covering at the moment are heavily based upon the platform of another bike. It's just a cost-efficient way to get a few different looking models out that will then appeal to a wider audience. Take, for example, the Northern 901 that I talked about yesterday, which is effectively a cool looking Swedish body kit on the super accomplished KTM 890 Adventure. Same story here, and with the rest of the XSR lineup. They're all retro style versions of bikes in Yamaha's more modern MT lineup. So the XSR125, XSR700 and this XSR900 are built upon the MT125, the MT07 and the MT09. And look, that is not a bad thing at all, because these are some of the most popular naked bikes on the market, and that's because they're really good. Especially the MT09, it's an absolute blast to ride, but the looks aren't for everyone. Yamaha definitely pushed the boundaries when it comes to modern aesthetics, and so if you're more of a traditionalist with round headlights and whatnot, then this could well do the job for you. The thing is though, the MT09 got a massive overhaul earlier this year, and I mean massive. Pretty much every component got a redesign or an upgrade, and it left the XSR900 looking a little out of date. That is, of course, until today, where pretty much all of the upgrades got carried over. Firstly, their CP3 engine, which had to be updated to meet Euro 5 emissions regulations, but they've actually taken the opportunity to make it quite a bit better. I mean, it was already highly regarded, but an extra 43cc in capacity owing to a 3mm longer stroke and lighter pistons by about 300 kilograms.
300 kilograms.
Both combined for 4 more horsepower, so now 117 peak at 10,000 RPM. Torque is up as well, so 6% more with 93 Nm at 7,000 RPM, and that's 1,500 RPM lower in the rev range than the previous gen, so it should feel more usable and gutsy on the road. The exhaust also gets a bit of an update with an underslung unit that doesn't look like much. They've gotten rid of any stylistic notion of a silencer, but it really does sound good, or at least I thought so when I borrowed the MT09 for a review. Part of it is down to the dual-sided outlets, so it's just as loud in either ear. And of course, being a triple, it just sounds good anyway. Now the clutch also gets different friction plates for this year, and the cam angle of the clutch has increased, both of which reduce the load on the springs, which leads to a lighter feel at the lever. It's still a slip assist clutch too, so the slipper preventing rear wheel lockups on aggressive downshifts, while the assist pulls the pack together under load so lighter springs can be used, again contributing to that light lever feel. Gear ratios have also been revised, which Yamaha say is to match the XSR900's increased power and torque output. The 6-speed transmission has been optimized with slightly higher gear ratios, with first gear going from 2.666 to 2.571 and second going from 2.000 to 1.947. These changes are designed to complement the increased moment of inertia of the crankshaft, the revised characteristics of the fuel injection system, and to help provide balanced performance combined with a strong feeling of torque. Onto the chassis, and if you compare it with the previous gen, you can see that there's obviously been quite an update to the frame. Yamaha say they've used the very latest manufacturing processes to make this one of the slimmest, lightest, and most compact frames in the class. One of the ways they've done this is by varying the wall thickness between 1.7mm and 3.5mm, so they've made it thicker at the parts where the frame needs the most strength, but saving weight elsewhere. They also say that the frame is more rigid in every dimension, so longitudinally, laterally, and torsionally, resulting in better straight line stability without sacrificing agility. The head pipe is now 30mm lower. They're saying that gives it better feel at the front end, but also results in a lower bar position for a more sporty riding position. They also claim 14% less inertia in the front end, which leads to quicker and more accurate turning. Now the swing arm is now 55mm longer, which bumps the wheelbase up by 55mm, and again this helps to improve straight line stability, but they've also moved the pivots to the outside of the frame as opposed to being on the inside as per the last generation, and they claim it's a slimmer design with again more rigidity. Now brakes, as with most Yamahas, are still from Advix with a pair of 4-pot radially mounted calipers on two 98mm discs at the front and a 2-pot caliper on a 245mm disc at the rear. But the front does now get a radial master cylinder courtesy of Brembo, and they're claiming better feedback, higher levels of control, and more power as a result, so pretty good then. Suspension is still from KYB with a fully adjustable 41mm upside down fork and a preload and rebound adjustable shock at the rear. Now wheels get a surprisingly big bump in spec with a new spin forging manufacturing technique. This helps to get the rim thickness right down without compromising on strength, and they've saved 700 grams between them in the process. This will have a more substantial effect on handling than if the weight was saved elsewhere on the bike, and that's because it's not only a saving in unsprung mass, which helps the suspension to respond quicker, but also rotating mass, so acceleration, deceleration, and changes of direction are all made easier. Loads of good stuff, but perhaps the biggest update to the bike is the tech. For a start, the old round inverted LCD display is gone, and you now get the same 3-inch TFT as the MT09. Not the biggest screen by any stretch, but still a significant improvement, and it allows for a more versatile interface to deal with all of these settings that I'm just about to talk about. You see, it now gets a 6-axis inertial measurement unit, which feeds lean data into the riding aids, specifically a lean sensitive traction control system, a slide control system, and the front wheel lift control system. There's also the option to switch between two ABS modes, so one lean sensitive and one not, and this is all tied into the new ride-by-wire throttle for an electronic suite that they say is closely related to that of their R1 sports bike. Just double check that, but the previous gen it had like 3 rider modes and then standard ABS and traction control, and that was pretty much it, so this genuinely is a massive advancement for this iteration. An up and down quick shifter now comes as standard as with the new MT09, but a nice bonus for the XSR is that cruise control isn't available on the standard MT09, only on the more premium SP version. But the 2022 XSR900 gets it as standard, and although it doesn't strike me as a first choice for long distance touring, it's still a feature you'd much rather have than not. Now onto the looks, and they've clearly put a lot of effort into the little touches on this bike. The signature round headlight is now fully LED, there are LED indicators too, and the LED tail light is hidden under the seat hump for a bit of a stealthy look. There's a beautiful machined top triple clamp, drilled fork caps, and an aluminium XSR logo. You get an embossed aluminium rear underplate, forged foot controls, black brake reservoirs, bar end mirrors, and a race style filler cap. But my favourite touch is the fold up passenger pegs, which keep the back end looking super clean without having to remove and refit them if you want to take a passenger from time to time. So like I say, a lot of attention to those little bits and bobs that lift the feeling of quality, but what about the overall package? Well, it was always going to be a bit of a challenge with the MT09 as a basis, because they intentionally stripped that bike right down to its rudiments. They called it a coverless design, so barely any bodywork, and it does make it look super modern, lightweight, and aggressive. So that might be one of the reasons they've had to go for a more 80s look with this bike than 60s or 70s, and quite a lot of it I really like. The new tank shape and side panels look good to me, and I do like the gold wheels, gold fork, and that 80s Yamaha racing paint scheme. But that seat with the massive hump, I'm not sure it's quite doing it for me. It just looks a bit too bulky at the back there, maybe less so on the black paint option because it blends in a bit more with the rest of the bike, but it's still, I mean, it's pretty chunky. It could be one of those designs that'll sit better after a few viewings and with the passage of time. But as always, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below. Now, unfortunately, no pricing as of yet, which is a bit of a shame when it's not available at the time of launch. Just like with the Norden 901 yesterday, it makes it hard to say if any of the improvements improvements are good or not without the context of any price change. But the MT09 is super competitive at 9 grand, one of the best value for money bikes on the market. And so although the XSR will be a little more, I'd still expect it to be pretty tempting. For context, the previous gen was about 9.5 grand, and the main competitors would be the Kawasaki Z900 RS starting at 10,649 and the Triumph Speed Twin up at 11. Honestly, these Yamahas are just ridiculously good value, and with all the changes above, they're pretty much the same as the MT09 that I reviewed earlier this year. It doesn't feel cheap at all, especially in the way it rides. It's an absolute hoot. And so I'd expect exactly the same from this bike, and I can't wait to swing a leg over it. But in the meantime, if you've not seen my MT09 review, then here it is for you to watch now.